Hey folks, Dude here. Looks like we're at part number 4. Okay, what I've done here is I got everything all polished up. I relieved the backside of the transfer bar. I still got to work on it a little bit. It's still a little bit crunchy, but for all intents and purposes, it's a lot better than what it was. Everything's been smoothed out on the top rail. Let me back up again because I'm right on top of this thing. Top rail's been polished. Everything's been relieved and smoothed up as much as I could. This was a little worn, so let me show you the proper one and one that I modified. You can see I thinned out the ears a little bit, so it has more travel up because the actual wear surface, it was a little tired. As long as there's enough rise and it's got enough press down, it's going to disconnect. I might have to readjust it again because it looks like it's still just a little bit low. So I'm going to have to probably compare, like, one that's a good one versus one that probably needs more adjustment. Now, the thing is, as long as I got stuff to play with and I got spare parts, I'm not worried about it. So if I burger one up, it's about a $4 or $5 part from Marlin or from eparts.com, which would be numerous gun parts. If you mess it up, it's a learning exercise. You can write it off. These pins, oh hell, man, if you get yourself some drill rod or some mild steel, you could probably turn that yourself. It's very, very easy in cross profile when you take the one apart and you look at it. It's not hard at all to make another one. Okay, so we now basically have got the lower receiver left side knocked out, polished up, and like I say, still needs a little more work. I got to play with it, I got to tweak it, I got to tune it, but I'm still trying to do a lot of stuff and I don't have a lot of time, so let me just do that as much as I can, probably later. Okay, so that's been worked on. Not much more you really need to do. Okay, I'll go with it a little bit more here. You need to polish these pins up because this is where your sear rides, this is where your hammer rides. You remove friction, everything works better. Like I say, of course, I didn't put that on there. I got that like that. Anytime you take off rough surfaces and make stuff move smooth on smooth, it's less friction, it's going to give you a better feel, the gun's going to shoot better, it's going to stay cleaner because dirt can't stick to slick surfaces, and, well, everything's just going to work better. Okay, so there we got the top of the sear. Let me zoom in. Okay, we've got the top of the sear surface. How's it look, basically? Well, let me zoom back out again, crawl up on this thing, and macro a little bit, because I can do that with this camera. Alright, for all intents and purposes, that's not a bad-looking surface. Case in point, yeah, I probably could use a little more work, but I'm not going to go wild and crazy on it. As a matter of fact, I'm probably not going to use a file at all. I'm going to use this guy right here, Mr. DMT Green, which would be a 2000 grit diamond stone. Okay, so what do you need with diamond stone? Well, you probably need some water, so I'll be right back and hit the sink. It's the nice thing about the Dude Workshop is I actually have the basement all to myself. Okay, stone's now wet, so let's do a couple passes and see what I get. Kind of a weird angle, but I'll see if I can't make it work here. Okay, now I can see for a fact I'm definitely approaching this at the wrong angle. So, when that occurs, stop. Do not proceed. Do not go on pass and go. Don't keep doing it or you're just going to bugger something. Okay, so I'm going to cheat this up at a slightly different angle. Okay, you can see I'm going low here, so readjust. That's looking better. Now, the other thing, too, is the sear is not going to be the absolute primary, most important thing to make these things smooth. The actual sear surface on the hammer, believe it or not, is what really tends to bite you in the bag. I know it sounds horrible, but that's just it riding over the little circles that give some place for the fines or the stuff that you're grinding off to go. And this is such a fine diamond stone that really you got to go crazy for a very long time to really do serious oh no. Alright, let's see where we're at. Okay, you can see the bluing is off. I'm kind of off angle, but that's easily corrected because you file a little bit and you look. You file a little bit and you look. You file a little bit more and you look. Because this is wet, all these fines, that would be the stuff that's ground off of the metal, it's called a fine, it's floating off. And also, this is such a fine diamond stone, it would take me literally probably the better part of 5 to 10 minutes to get really, really off. Okay, let's see what that looks like. That's looking pretty good to me, man. It's not dead on flat, but you know what? I found on my own, okay, I found on my own research that basically you have to play with these because every one of these guns is an individual, and you kind of have to put it together, try it, put it together, try it, put it together, try it, and as long as you keep these things lubed and you, rub the hammer versus the sear, they're going to wear in, and they're going to basically make a relationship, and that's called burnishing. That's where you rub one piece of metal on another piece of metal, and they wear together to a nice relationship upon each other and find a way. Okay, well, let me do a couple passes by hand here, just be on the crazy side. I usually used to do this by hand. I almost never would chuck it in a vise. Well, hell, I still got my touch. Okay, you can see how much prettier, kinda. Let me try to back this mug up here. For some reason it's not wanting a macro today. Might not be enough light. Got my light switch. Well, that ain't making much difference. Well, maybe a little bit. But you can see it's cleaned up quite a bit. And it's sharp. I mean, this edge that actually is going to be engaging the hammer, they refer to having something known as a knife edge. Okay, now, essentially on the hammer itself, I'm going to use the hammer I've already worked on just, for sheer fun and grins. Okay, this hammer, combination with the sear, all these sides, any place you see bluing, pretty much you could polish it off and just get it smooth. Bluing is basically a form of rust. So, essentially what you're doing is you're taking it apart and you're bluing it blue, which is a form of rust, as opposed to, atmospheric rust, which is red. So, by doing something called pacification, you're pacifying the part to not rust with atmospheric rust by installing a rust being either a phosphate rust, which would be phosphating, or also known as parkerizing, or you're putting on there something, a chemical rust. You're bluing it. It's basically rust, but it's blue. And because you have one pacified part that's already a type of rust, it's pretty hard for it to re-rust. Old tech, new tech. Well, the old tech was the red rust, where you simply would take the thing, you would whiz on it, and you would let it rust. Then you would brush off all the rust with a very rough brush called carding, where you would be carding off the rust. You would reapply your quote-unquote solution, and you would let it rust some more, and you would get something known as a browning. Not a rifle, but the color known as a browning. Kind of looks kind of cool. You see it on a lot of old muzzleloader type guns, and it's still around to this day. Gunsmiths still do it, but you need to have a cabinet with high humidity to make the things rust. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so sear's been worked on a little bit. Still needs to get polished up on all the flat sides, make sure everybody burnishes up, and make sure everybody has a smooth relationship with one another. Let's just pull a hammer off here, and I'll show you what we do. Okay, out of the box, I said in the previous video, these things are coarse as hell. I do mean they are coarse as hell. Smooth up all your sides. Smooth up your bearing faces. This radius right here is usually unbelievably rough. Now, in terms of the actual engaging surfaces of the sear, what I'll normally do, I'll tell you what I'll normally do. I'll take the finest, absolute finest file I have. That's not it. Okay, it'd probably be one of my needles. And you go to Harbor Freight, you get these guys really cheap. If you look at these, they usually have a safe side and they have an unsafe side. That would be the unsafe side. Okay, this is one of the files without safe sides. Some of them do, some of them don't. I mean, they're really not the most expensive things on the planet. They actually wear like iron, though. They are actually very good little files. Well, anyway, what I would do, first off, is I take the file and I do something called breaking the edge. Because if you look at this, it's not a smooth progression. It actually has like a little lip on it. You got to knock that lip off on the sear. Then what you do is you run your file and you basically get this square. Then you get your finest, and I do mean absolute finest file, and you engage thusly, and I'm not going to do it because this one's already pretty, and you basically get it to the point where it's working nicely. Then what you do is you check your fit. Now, like I said, you could use the magic marker, and you could do your, well, let's give me a bump in the camera again. You can basically use your magic marker to check your relationship. Notice, I don't have a whole hell lot of engagement on this hammer, but it's actually got such a good bite. I mean, I cannot move this thing whatsoever. It has got a huge bite for the amount of bite it's got. It's not going anywhere. It's got very good, very good penetration into the slots, and it's not moving. And actually, to tell you the truth, that's a really slick feel right out of the box. I mean, you can slide these two pieces off each other, and there's very slight resistance. If I put a load of oil on here, this would be very, very, very slick. And if you want to go and be absolutely crazy about it, here's what you do. You get this square, you get that pretty, you load them both up with oil, you sit in front of the TV, and you marry your two parts. That's right. You basically wear the two of them together, going side by side, until it comes time to shoot it, and you would not believe how much that slicks those things up. Because what you're doing is you're simulating, well, hell, you're simulating 4,000 to 5,000 rounds minimum. With a 22, that's a lot of weekends, dude. Okay, now also what I do on mine, and this is, well, something that I do. I'll go underneath the hammer. Normally this is dead square. I'll put a slight kidney shape into it because it gives you room for excess travel of the spring. Okay, now, conversely, I've said this before, another dirty little secret. Cut a coil off the spring. That's right. Use Mr. Dremel tool, get your cutoff wheel, cut one, and I do repeat, one coil off these hammer springs. They're usually too strong, they put too much stress on the sear, they really, well, they don't help you much, and they're not that much safer. A really heavy trigger pull makes the lawyers happy. It doesn't make you happy because you're trying to hold the gun straight, you're squeezing, 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 squeezing. When's it going to fire? Squeezing, 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 straining, squeezing, squeezing. Where's the bullet going? Squeezing, straining, bang. Well, that didn't feel good. Reset for another shot. Squeezing, squeezing, repeat, repeat, repeat. Before you know it, you're all over the paper because you have no real consistency because your trigger pull just sucks. All right, now, I got a minute and a half, so I'm going to play around here. Okay, in the... oh boy, this booker's getting heavier. Okay, in the FRANKENSTONER, I put a Timney trigger. The Timney trigger is approximately, well, let's see. The Timney trigger is about that. Yeah, that was the Timney trigger firing. That's about a quarter inch of movement. It breaks like a glass rod. It was $200 almost, and it's a 3-pound Timney trigger. Can I even focus on that? Yeah, it's a 3-pound Timney trigger. What happens is, it's a little compartmentalized device. You drop it to the receiver. Got a minute, I know. Drop the little booger into the receiver, and what happens is, you put the cross pins through there. It stabilizes with 2 little set screws that screw down and lock it into place on the bottom of your your lower receiver. So you then have the cross pins holding it steady. You have these 2 little set screws locking into place. 2 more set screws screw on top of that, so it cannot unscrew. Timney trigger's good shiznit, man. They make them for 10-22s, they make them for AR-15s, they make them for tons of other bolt guns. I know AR-15s and 10-22s aren't bolt guns, I know that. Okay, but there's tons of these stuff available. They are excellent stuff, and I know that was a mini FRANKENSTONER update, but all these things help you shoot better. Get your trigger nice and, well, you can't help but shoot better. Well, this is going to be part 4, I think. Okay, folks, there'll be probably a 5 and a 6 or 20. I don't know. It's kind of taking over. All right, folks, 80s Podcast Channel. Tony, you're 60 and 70. See ya!